example of why this mountain is so unique. What other mountain do you actually just get to see a cross-section of that volcano and see how it was built? Now we have what is called a stratovolcano. Stratos meaning layers. And that's really how this was built. One eruption after another, overlapping on each other as they built this mountain. You know, our history starts at about 500,000 years ago with a room of hot melted rock building up underneath about 3 to 5 miles down, called a magma chamber. And by about 420,000 years ago, it was ready to erupt. And at 420,000 years ago, a crack opened over here. Do you see Mount Scott peeking over the top of the rim there? Now, Mount Scott erupted about 420,000 years ago, and what perhaps happened is a crack opened in the ground, and hot melted rock flowed out in a big lava flow, and then it laid out, kind of like when you spread frosting over on a cake. It solidified, and then maybe a few years later you had another eruption and another layer added, another eruption and another layer added. It started to look like a layer cake, and you can see that effect right here at the base of La Rock. All of these layers stacked up one after another. Other ways that this mountain was built was when we had an overabundance of silica, sand, in the mix, things tended to explode rather than lay out in nice lava flows. So that's how you got something like La Rock. La Rock, about 7,900 years ago, exploded. It erupted like Mount St. Helens did in 1980, in that it blew out to the west rather than straight up in the air. And it created a big divot, a big crater in the side of the mountain. And you can see that crater from here. That white layer up there is the floor of that crater that then filled slowly with hot melted rock lava and then spilled out on either side of this big cliff here. But what's amazing is with these two methods of building this mountain, we did not just have one eruptive center out of the middle of this mountain. We have many eruptive centers, many places that it erupted out of. You start with Mount Scott, but then you move about 7 miles south to the area between the two dips in the rim. Down in the water, there's a little area called Phantom Ship that we'll be visiting in about an hour. And Phantom Ship is our oldest rock within the caldera rim, and that's 400,000 years old. Then, about 50,000 years later, you move to the left of this leftmost dip in the rim to a location we call Sentinel Point that erupted about 350,000 years ago. Then it moved another 7 miles south over here to Garfield Peak. Do you see the layers in the rim over here? That above that is Garfield Peak. Garfield Peak is that big peak to the east of the Crater Lake Lodge. That erupted about 300,000 years ago. So one after another, we have all of these eruptions building up this mountain one at a time until this mountain ended up at 12,000 feet tall and about 156 square miles in area. We're at about 6,100 feet of elevation. The top of the mountain was 12,000 feet tall, so we're missing over a mile of rock above us. At our next stop, we're going to talk about why all of that material is missing, and why we have the opportunity to see all of this inner workings of this volcano, the layers, and one of my favorite things, the dikes. If we move up here just a little bit farther, you're going to see a little snake, a line this mountain. This is what's called a geologic dike. And what that is basically a crack that formed in the mountain, and lava likes to take the path of least resistance. So what happens is that lava makes its way up, in this case into the crater of La Rock, and is what filled the crater and caused it to overflow and create these big wings on either side. We're going to see a much bigger geologic dike over at our next stop called Devil's Backbone. Really dramatic names, I know. But we're going to talk about what created it and why we can see it now, why this mountain collapsed at our next stop. So let's, I'll let you get a photo of that geologic dike if you'd like. But in the meantime, let me show you a little bit